Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Doyle. I'm the Conservatoire Coordinator here at the MTU Cork School of Music, and on behalf of the Department of Orchestral Studies and our head, Joan Scannell, and the head of the school, Dr. Ciara Glasshy-Norton, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Doolin Room for this afternoon's lunchtime recital. In particular, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to our Norwegian friends and colleagues who join us here this afternoon, and to pay particular mention to the UNOF and the Erasmus Plus, which are funding this programme, and indeed our colleagues in the Irish Association of Youth Orchestras, Alan, Sinead and Jack, for linking in with us. And to the Thalia Quartet and the Prosjekt MMXX quartets, which we'll be talking more about and performing, of course. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Birgitte, who starts the presentations, and will be followed by one of our doctoral students here, Caitlin, who will talk about the technology that was used to enable and enhance this particular project. So, Birgitte, thank you.
So, yeah, I'm Birgitte, and I'm the president of the Norwegian Youth Orchestra Association, which had this project together with IAYO, the Irish Association, our sister association. So, UNOF is, as I said, the Norwegian Youth Orchestra Association, and we have around 5,500 members, divided in 175 different orchestras. And our members are from the age of approximately 4 and up to 26. And in next year, we have our 50th anniversary, and in that case, we have a lot of projects going, and this is one of them. So this project includes trying to rehearse together online, and it's funded by Erasmus Plus, and we have now kind of collaborated with 2 ensembles. We have Prosjekt MMXX from Norway and Thalia Quartet from Ireland. And our goal with the project is to find out if it's actually possible to rehearse together online. And if it is, we would like to make kind of a guide as a result of the project. But why do we do this? It's not like lockdown times anymore. But one of the reasons why is because Norway is quite a big country. We have approximately the same population as Ireland, but we are almost 4.5 times the size. Cool. So it takes quite a long time to travel across the country. And there's a lot of small cities where they maybe don't have teachers on every instrument, and at least they don't have like really big music schools. And then it's quite far to travel to the next big music school, at least in another part of the country, because as you see, these staffs are orchestra members, and there's a lot of them here, and that's so many at the top. So if you live in Hammerfest, furthest on top, and you want to play violin, they usually have a violin teacher, but maybe they don't have an orchestra, at least they don't have like chamber music ensembles, but you want to develop on your instrument. Then you maybe have to travel to another big city, but that could take maybe between 5 and 10 or 12 hours drive, and then you can't do that every week. So we thought that it could be nice to have a supplement to these physical meetings, and therefore we do this project. And it's also nice to don't travel so much because of the environment. Yeah, we want to include everyone, and also those who don't live in the big cities. So what we do in this project is that we have online rehearsals. We started in January. We're now kind of in the middle. We will have some rehearsals after this meeting, and then we will meet again after. After all the rehearsals, we write a reflection of how we found the rehearsal, and I will after that collect all these and have some interviews with teachers that online rehearsals, and we'll also collect answers from machine, but it's hard to work musically because of the latency, and it's hard to work in details. And we also found out that slow movements are easier, because then if you have some latency, it doesn't everything doesn't fall apart. And so, and we also found out that if we have long distances, often the latency can be, it can vary from where you are and where the server you're connected to are. So, and it's also really strange for us to don't see each other. We had to concentrate pretty much in another way that we were used to at rehearsals. And the difference between being connected to Wi-Fi and Ethernet is that the Ethernet is more stable, but it doesn't actually, it doesn't vary on how much latency you have. It just varies on sometimes if you're at Wi-Fi, it kind of jumps, and sometimes it's stable, and then suddenly you're out of nowhere and you don't understand anything. So, kind of our conclusion so far is that online rehearsals is kind of a good supplement, but it do not replace physical rehearsals. But if you, as I said earlier, live in a really small city, it could be nice to have some online rehearsals, kind of to get you motivated and to have progression between physical meetings. And so yeah, we would like after this to make a guide out of our answers and results, so that maybe more people can use this supplement. Yeah. And then it's Caitlin's turn.
CSM, but for this project, I was the Irish side of the technical advisory stuff. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what Espen was my counterpart over in Norway, worked on, and a little bit more about the online rehearsal spaces, so low latency audio spaces. So some frequently asked questions that have come up when I've talked about this previously. So what is a low latency audio rehearsal space? So I'm sure most people probably know what latency is, but in this case, it does refer to the time delay you hear when performing with other musicians online. If you have tried to rehearse with other musicians over Zoom, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's basically these softwares are deliberately to try and offset that kind of lag when you play with other people online. What is an audio interface? So an audio interface is a piece of hardware that converts analog signals into digital ones. So in other words, it takes the sound that you make in the real world into your microphone, converts it into a signal that your computer can understand and play back to you. And then this is specifically for one of the softwares I'm going to be discussing. What is Jack? So Jack is a type of sound server specifically optimized for the demands of audio production and online rehearsal. So it's an abbreviation of Jack Audio Connection Kit, so it's kind of contained within itself. So, how did we get started? Myself and Espen worked together to decide on the best hardware for the project. So after some discussion, we concluded that a USB interface and the T-Bone Ovid mic with a clip for the instruments would be the most appropriate for the project. That way the musicians wouldn't have to worry about positioning the mic correctly and hitting off it, things like that. This was something that had come up in the previous project that I worked with IAYO, was trying to get that positioning right every time was difficult. Sorry, my mouse has disappeared. There we go. So our final setup for the project was an interface, a microphone, an XLR lead, the clip, and then headphones or smartphones, because otherwise you'd end up with a feedback loop if you tried to use the audio output from your computer, and then a headphone adapter and an Ethernet cable. I will touch on Ethernet as well, but Birgitte mostly covered it already. So what is Jamulus? So Jamulus is the first software that Espen and I investigated. So it's a software for playing music and rehearsing with low latency. It's a very basic program. It's really easy to just kind of plug it and go. It's server-based. It is completely free to use, which makes it quite appealing. And it is audio only. So the other two that I'm going to discuss do have extra features that Jamulus doesn't have, but biggest thing about Jamulus is that it's free and low bandwidth. So additionally, the servers that the software was set up on were external, so we used Amazon Web Services Lightsail to set up the servers for that, and they were based in Dublin, Sweden, and Frankfurt. So what is Jacktrip? So this is the one with Jack in the name. So Jacktrip was the second low latency audio rehearsal space we investigated for the project. It also acts as a performance platform. So Jacktrip has video streaming and radio available for digital concerts and performances. And it has a built-in recording feature that you can pay for. So similarly to Jamulus, Jacktrip performed well with latency, though not as well as Jamulus, but a dedicated server was more expensive, and you only got 30 minutes free rehearsal time a day, or a week. I need to double check that one, sorry. It's also significantly more bandwidth heavy than Jamulus, so if you were more rural, it just wasn't suitable. And then the third and final software that we tested for this project was Jamkazam. So of the three options, it was the most limited in its free version, and it was also the most expensive to use. So to get the same quality audio as Jamulus and Jacktrip's free versions, you had to purchase the most expensive membership option, and any of the cheaper options had time caps and lower audio and connection quality. Additionally, though it had a video streaming functionality, just like with the audio, the quality of the video was poor unless you paid for the highest tier membership. The main point in its favor was that you didn't need to set up a server, but honestly it was by far the weakest of the three, and it still worked out more expensive, even with server costs included for the others. We did actually discuss one or two other software that we didn't end up testing, such as Sonobus, which seemed to have a really extensive range of features, but a much steeper learning curve. So we kind of parked that and went with Jamulus. So why Jamulus? So of the three software that we tested, it was the most user-friendly, the cheapest, the least bandwidth use, and the connectivity was the most consistent. Additionally, like with the cheapest, like the servers are only they're less than €4 a server, and you can host as quite a large number of musicians on that. I think the most that I've gotten before is 20. I haven't tested beyond that because I haven't needed to, but your mileage may vary with that. But regardless, it was the most consistently well-performing. So some of the technical issues, again, these were kind of touched on a little bit already, but the biggest issue for this project was definitely going to be distance and connectivity. So there was issues on my side getting the musicians connected to Jamulus. The lag between the two countries, as was mentioned, was going to be difficult to navigate. And then also, I was working mostly remotely, so diagnosing technical issues can be hard to do remotely. So what I did end up doing was meeting with the Irish musicians to help them set up. So some of the musicians I worked with were unfamiliar with audio interfaces and audio software. So I met with I met with the Irish musicians in person to walk through the setup, so that way if an issue did pop up, they could tell me where along the chain of connection it had started to show up for them. Additionally, using any other internet-heavy applications or devices at the same time would result in poor performance, and it's exacerbated again by the distance between the two halves of the orchestra. We experimented, myself and Espen, with servers based in Stockholm, Frankfurt and Dublin, and while Frankfurt was found to be best, the ping was still high and randomly jumped up as was mentioned, but because of this it was recommended to use Ethernet, but unfortunately some of the musicians didn't have consistent access to this either, so that's another limiting factor. And additionally, due to a variety of internet speeds and bandwidths available in the area, people's signals are going to be noisier or weaker than others, and that'll vary session to session regardless of how well you have it set up. So yeah, that kind of covers the technical side of the project, so I will pass it back over and put on the other presentation.
So then we're going through to a repertoire and how this works. So between all the musical pieces,
chose the repertoire based on a mix-up between, or a range between fast-paced music and slow-paced music, because we tested both of them. And to conclude that, first of all, fast-paced music is very hard to play on Jamulus. Because of the latency, like semiquavers and quavers and so on, fast-paced notes will sound terrible. Because if someone playing like da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-dum, and another one play that, but they had different latency, so it sounds like blah, 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 all the time. So the experience we had with, for example, the whole first movement, if you know about it, it starts with dum, ticka dum, ticka dum, ticka dum. It sounded like all the time, because we didn't have the same latency, and it was too unstable to play, unfortunately. Then we had the second movement, which is quite slow. It goes very slow, and it's a very beautiful movement, of course, but it's easier to time when they have to start playing together. Because the problem is that if the musicians are listening to each other, they may be too late for me to hear it. So if, for example, the first violin are playing something, and then the second violins are listening to that, and they play on that, for me as a conductor, it will sound different timing. It will sound not together at all. So they had to, like, most of the time, unfortunately, gamble to when they had to play, and they had to think of it. They had to, like, play in the future. So they needed to think, like, is it my time to play now? I will gamble and then try to play. And the result is that on my side, it sounded actually not too bad. We have some recordings. It sounded okay. But on their side, it sounded terrible. And that's the problem, because then the musicians won't use their musicianship or their competence within to play together and to play the music together, because they need to have so much more focus on other things that's not so important. So we had some issues, but we managed to get through it, and we are going to play the repertoire you see here, the first and second movement of the whole suite. That's just like which is recorded number 8 first movement, and also the Norwegian double suite quartet number 1, the second and third movements. And all of this we have played on Jamulus except for the second movement. So then we had like a control to check whether it helped to have Jamulus before we met or not. And the musicians have thought about it, so we can ask them what they think about it. But in my opinion, unfortunately, Jamulus may have been a little bad for fast-paced music, because then we have like they had like bad habits playing, and when we met it was like, are we going to play now? And they had to listen at a different level than when we had Jamulus. But on the slow-paced music, it may be actually not too bad to play, because then we are more focused on the music. I don't know how you think about it, but it's very good for the start process, for the very beginning of the process to learn new music, because then they're going to be familiar with the sheet, they're going to learn the notes, they're going to play the correct notes, and that's very good, because then it's easier when we meet to play and work with the music in detail, and not sight read. But I think that Jamulus, or it may be our fault, but Jamulus has like a point where it's fine, it sounds okay, and then that's the limit for how we can work with the music. Because we want to work with the music on a high level, we want to work with the details, and we want to really go deep in the music, but Jamulus makes it quite hard to do that, because we don't know if the technical difficulties are destroying our thoughts, or there's something wrong with on my side with the technical things, and the balance, because some of them have 100 milliseconds of latency, some of them have 30, and it's like, I can't hear you. It was a lot of, oh sorry, I can't hear you, Can you hear me now? And we had to like adjust the level and everything, and it was like, I don't know how we come with the balance, because on their side it may sound different from on my side, and on Jamulus, as you saw in the picture, you have like levers on a soundboard, and we can adjust that. The problem is that if I adjust, for example, the violas down, because they sound too much in my ears, the balance will be fake, or it won't be a good start point to work with the balance. So I would say on this project, as a conductor, I don't feel like a conductor on Jamulus. I feel just like a leader, or very like strict leader. We have the police counting very loud 1, 2, 3, 4 all the time, and I'm sitting in my living room or where my computer is and waving my arms when no one is seeing it. All the people passing by, and I think it looks very stupid. But the problem is that for me as a conductor, I'm in need of the visual signs of the musicians to understand what they play, what they do, and for them as well to see my hands or to see my movements. So I think the visual aspect of this it's very important. It's actually, I think, the key to maybe the success, to have the visual side of it, because of course we can talk about it and we can, like, I can count and like be a metronome, but then it would be very static and it would be not so good, unfortunately. So it was a good, fun project, and we're going to have some more research after the meeting here, but I think I will speak for everyone when I say that we are very glad to be here. We're very glad to meet all in person to play together, and I'm very happy to present the results now. And as I said to the musicians as well, it doesn't have to be perfect, because the because the point of this project is to see how far we can come with the music. And if we had like 3 or 4 weeks of rehearsal time, then it would be so much different than just these 3 days with very intense rehearsal time. So yeah, you can come up and give a round of applause. So it's a very, very beautiful ensemble, and we have worked together now for the past 3 days, very intense with the repertoire, and I think we look forward to playing now for our audience. So we will start with the Greek Public Suite, first and second movement. 8th string quartet, first movement. And this is one of the pieces that we may have found actually easier to play. It's quite a hard quartet at the movement because it's very intricate chord progression and harmonics, but this is quite slow. So when it's slow, it was not too bad to play on Jamulus because it's easier to understand where we are in the bar and how we can play more or less together. But the problem here is that the sound that we get off from Jamulus is very mechanical. So when we want to work with a rich sound and a mood and everything, we can't actually do that because it's so mechanical. Unfortunately, sometimes it sounds like just a MIDI sound, and it's very static and it's very hard to. I can say to the musicians, please play Witcher, please play Rounder, and the result, it's unfortunately more or less the same because of Jamulus's limited capabilities of reproducing the sound that comes from the musicians. But then we meet again here, and we are trying to work on it. So the Shostakovich 8th movement, 8th string quartet, first movement. Jamulus, but we also have made like a control, as I said, for the second movement. It's quite fast-paced music. So the second movement, we started to rehearse on Monday, and we only had these few days to rehearse it. But it's very interesting to see how far we have gotten with only meeting in person and rehearsing a piece or a new movement without meeting the Jamulus before. And I think that, to be honest, I don't know how far we could have gotten if you have played the Jamulus, because this is a fast-paced movement. It may actually have been worse in case of learning some bad habits playing together, not maybe being precise, or maybe having to move the tempo as well. But I think we have got quite far with the movement as well, and it's interesting to see because we want Jamulus to be a good supplement to just normal rehearsals and meeting in person. But as Birgitte said, it's absolutely no replacement at all. Because we are doing so much visual cues to each other. We are musicians, we need to really look at each other to see the face expressions, the bowing and everything. And that is absolutely no go on Jamulus, unfortunately. And we have thought maybe if we had a software with the visual side as well, the problem would be that the video quality is the best when we have it on screen. And if there are some delays between, or latency between the video and the sound and all them together, it may actually have been quite a mismatch between what we see, what we hear, and what we're playing. So it's a discussion we're having how good it is to have Jamulus. It's a sad thing that we're going back to Jamulus now since we have been here. But the Thalia Quartet is traveling to Trondheim in Norway, where we're going to meet again with some new repertoire as well. And now, since we have the experience with Jamulus and we have now got more familiar with it, I think we can explore it more in like meaning of having more maybe jam sessions or some improvisation. And we also know the limits of Jamulus, and we want to push the limits. And we also know what capabilities we have with Jamulus. And maybe the process of learning a music piece together with Jamulus will be easier after this first part of the project. Or maybe we will find out like it's not worth it. Well, then that's kind of the conclusion. It's a very interesting project, and hopefully we'll come up with a guide to help both the youth and the kids or children, both in Ireland and Norway, to play together when they're having a distance. And hopefully you have enjoyed this as well, as I have. But now we're going to finish up with the score, and we'll start with the third movement, and we'll finish with the second movement. to the continuation of this project, and we're going to research even more than we have done. So thank you for coming and attending this performance as well. Hope you have learned something, and we're looking forward to getting guide out as well. So have a good day and evening. Thank you.